You know that feeling when you get the keys to your first real house? Not an apartment, not a condo, but a bona fide grass in the front, garage in the back house. It's a feeling of pure, uncut American dream. For me, that dream smelled like fresh paint, new carpet, and the faint, thrilling scent of ozone from brand new electronics. I stood in the middle of my empty two-car garage, a cavernous, beautiful space, and grinned like an idiot. This was it. The promised land. My bat cave. My fortress of solitude. This was going to be the home of K4ALX, my amateur radio station, in all its glory. I had boxes. So many boxes. Each one was labeled with a level of care that would make a museum curator weep. Yaesu FTDX 101 MP, handle with more care than a newborn, one read. Another, antenna tuner, the heart and soul. I spent the first weekend in a state of pure bliss, carefully unpacking my treasures, arranging them on a brand new workbench I'd just assembled. The centerpiece was the Yaesu, a magnificent transceiver that was probably worth more than the car I drove. It was black, sleek, and covered in enough knobs and dials to intimidate a 747 pilot. To me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I was in the middle of lovingly wiping a microfiber cloth over its VFO dial when I heard a sound that would become the soundtrack to my own personal suburban hell. A sharp, impossibly loud rap 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 on my raised garage door. I looked up, blinking in the sudden intrusion of daylight. A silhouette stood there, backlit by the afternoon sun like some kind of avenging angel. As my eyes adjusted, the silhouette resolved into a woman. She was probably in her mid-50s, with a blonde haircut so rigidly hairsprayed it looked like it could deflect small arms fire. She wore a pastel pink tracksuit, and a smile that was surgically precise, yet completely devoid of warmth. "Well, hello there," she chirped, her voice a little too loud for the enclosed space. She strode in without an invitation, her pristine white sneakers squeaking on the clean concrete floor. "It's just so wonderful to have new blood in the neighborhood. I'm Karen, the HOA president. We're like one big happy family here." Ah, the HOA president. I'd seen the binder of rules they'd given me at closing. It was about 4 inches thick, with a laminated cover. I'd used it to prop open a window while the paint fumes aired out. "Hey, I'm Alex," I said, offering a friendly hand. She took it, her grip surprisingly firm, her eyes not on me, but scanning every corner of my garage. Her gaze landed on the Yaesu. Her perfect smile tightened by a millimeter. "And what is all this electronic paraphernalia?" she asked, the last word dripping with a delicate condescension. "Oh, this is my hobby," I said, my enthusiasm getting the better of me. "Ham radio. Amateur radio, you know? I'm a licensed operator. I get to talk to people all over the world with this stuff. It's pretty cool." "Radio," she repeated, the word tasting like something sour in her mouth. "I see." She did not, in fact, see. Her eyes narrowed. "You know, Alex, here in the Whispering Pines community, we pride ourselves on maintaining a certain aesthetic integrity, for the good of everyone's property values, of course." "Of course," I nodded, trying to be agreeable. "Don't worry, I'm a professional. Everything will be neat and tidy." "That will involve antennas, I presume?" she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, yeah," I chuckled. "Kind of hard to transmit without one, but I'm planning something very discreet. You'll barely even notice it." "We notice everything, Alex," she said, her smile finally vanishing. "Welcome to the neighborhood." She turned on her heel and squeaked her way out of my garage, leaving me in a sudden, unnerving silence. I looked at my beautiful radio, then at the empty space where she had stood. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I had a feeling my life in Whispering Pines was about to get a lot more interesting. A few days later, my feeling was confirmed. I came home from work to find a crisp, cream-colored envelope taped to my front door. It wasn't sealed. It was folded in a way that suggested it could be opened and read by anyone, a passive-aggressive power move if I'd ever seen one. The letterhead was embossed with a clip art pine tree and the words, "Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." It was a formal warning. It cited bylaws I didn't know existed, like Section 12, Paragraph 4, on the prohibition of external structures not approved by the Architectural Review Committee. It went on to talk about the potential for radio frequency interference, RFI, and the visual blight of unauthorized aerials. It was signed, in a sharp, angry-looking cursive, by Karen President. I burst out laughing. It was so absurdly official, so comically serious. I called my buddy Mark on a video chat and read it to him, doing my best impression of a stuffy bureaucrat. Visual blight? Mark howled with laughter on the other end. What does she think you're going to put up, the Eiffel Tower? Close, I said. I was actually thinking of starting small, just to test the waters. And that's what I did. The following Saturday, I installed a simple G5 RV dipole antenna. For the non-radio folks, that's basically a long wire strung up between 2 points. I ran it from the peak of my roof to a tall tree in my backyard. It was thin, discreet, and from the street, you could only see it if you were really looking for it. I patted myself on the back. It was a perfect compromise. It was practically invisible. Apparently, Karen had bionic eyes. The very next day, another cream-colored envelope appeared. This one wasn't a warning. It was a bill. A $100 fine for failure to comply with the previous day's notice. It also included a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my antenna wire, circled in red marker like it was evidence from a crime scene. The accompanying letter demanded the immediate and permanent removal of the offending apparatus. The playful defiance I'd felt was starting to curdle into genuine annoyance. This woman was serious, and if she was going to be serious, then so was I. A simple wire antenna wasn't going to cut it for my long-term plans anyway. It was time to stop compromising. It was time to go big. It was time to build a tower. A simple wire antenna was one thing. A 50-foot aluminum tower was another. I'm handy, but I'm not dig a 4-foot deep concrete foundation handy. For that, I needed professionals. I found a company online called Apex Antenna Tower Services. Their website looked like it was designed in 1998, but their reviews were stellar. I gave them a call. 2 days later, a beat-up Ford F-250 that sounded like a rock tumbler full of angry badgers rumbled up to my curb. 2 men hopped out. The first was a mountain of a man named Dave, with a huge, graying beard and a t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." The second was smaller, wearier, and introduced himself as Gary. He had a mischievous glint in his eye and a tool belt that looked like it weighed more than he did. I explained the situation. I showed them Karen's letters. Dave read them, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he let out a booming laugh that rattled my windows. "Oh, you got one of those," he chortled. "A queen bee. Thinks the whole cul-de-sac is her personal fiefdom. We've dealt with her kind before, kid. Many, many times." Gary chimed in, a grin spreading across his face. "This is our favorite kind of job. A spite job. Gives it a little extra flavor, you know." We stood in my backyard as I described what I wanted. A modest, self-supporting tower, about 50 feet high. Dave stroked his beard thoughtfully. 50 feet is good, he said. It's effective. But is it satisfying? What do you mean? I asked. Well, Dave continued, a twinkle in his eye. For a little extra, we could get you a 70-footer. Paint it bright orange. Or, hear me out, we could put a motorized, rotating platform on top. You could mount a life-size gargoyle on it. Imagine her face when she's having her morning coffee, and a stone demon slowly turns to stare into her soul. I like the way you think, Dave, I said, laughing. But let's stick to the 50-foot plan for now. I need to be able to claim the high ground, morally speaking. Suit yourself, Gary shrugged. We'll draw up the plans. You get the city permits. Once that's done, we dig. Should be a fun one. As they drove away in their thunderous truck, I saw a curtain twitch in Karen's kitchen window. She was watching. Of course she was. Let her watch, I thought. The game was on. Getting the permit from the city was surprisingly painless. Turns out, as long as the structure is in your backyard, under a certain height, and not violating any easements, they don't really care. With the permit in hand, I called Dave and Gary. It was time to break ground. They arrived a week later with a mini excavator that looked like a giant mechanical wasp. The moment its diesel engine roared to life, I knew it was only a matter of time. The digging was loud, messy, and glorious. They tore a perfect 4x4-foot hole in my lawn, a deep, earthy promise of the tower to come. I was inside, making them a pitcher of iced tea, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a siren. I peeked out the front window. A police cruiser was pulling up to my curb. My heart did a little pitter-patter of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by a grim sense of satisfaction. She actually did it. She called the cops on me for digging a hole. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things and a weary posture that suggested he was just a few years from retirement. The other was young, sharp, and looked like he'd memorized the entire penal code for fun. I walked out to meet them, my hands held up in a placating gesture. "Afternoon, officers," I said calmly. "Something I can help you with?" The older cop, whose name tag read Miller, sighed. "We got a call about, He consulted his notepad. "Suspicious and unauthorized construction creating a potential seismic hazard." He looked up from the pad and stared at the hole in my backyard. He looked at me. He looked over at Karen's house, where she was now standing on her porch, arms crossed, trying to look concerned and not at all smug. "Let me guess," Officer Miller said, a note of profound tiredness in his voice. "Your neighbor is a Mrs. Robinson?" "That's the one," I said. "Figured." He turned to his younger partner, Officer Davis. "Davis, you're new here. Let me introduce you to a local phenomenon." I suppressed a smile as I explained the situation, handing them the freshly minted city permit. Davis took it and examined it with the intensity of a diamond appraiser. Miller just glanced at it and handed it back. "Looks like you're all good, son," Miller said, his voice loud enough for Karen to hear. "Your paperwork is solid. You're not violating any city ordinances." He then lowered his voice slightly. "Just between you and me, though, try not to aim any of your, radio waves at her prize-winning petunias. She called us last spring because a squirrel was taunting them." Officer Davis, still trying to be professional, walked over to Karen. "Ma'am, the homeowner has all the required permits. There's no legal issue here." Karen's face, which had been a mask of righteous concern, soured immediately. "But it's an eyesore. It's going to ruin the neighborhood. And the noise. I have a delicate constitution." Miller just shook his head and walked back to the car. "Have a good day, sir," he said to me with a subtle wink. "Try to keep the seismic hazards to a minimum." They drove off, leaving Karen fuming on her porch. Dave and Gary, who had been watching the whole thing with undisguised glee, gave me a round of applause. The first battle was a victory, but I knew the war was far from over. The concrete was poured, the foundation was set, and the tower itself was assembled in gleaming, 50-foot sections on my lawn. The day of the raising was a momentous occasion. Dave and Gary worked with the precision of a NASCAR pit crew, and by noon, it was up. It was a thing of beauty, a slender, elegant aluminum spire reaching for the sky. It was a monument to free speech, to hobbyism, and, let's be honest, to my own stubbornness. It took Karen less than 24 hours to retaliate. This time, the cream-colored envelope was thicker. It was a formal summons to an emergency HOA meeting. The subject: Alex's numerous and egregious violations of the Whispering Pines community covenants. The meeting was held in her living room. The air was thick with the scent of potpourri and quiet desperation. Her house was decorated in a style I could only describe as beige oppression. Every surface was either beige, off-white, or a pale, apologetic floral pattern. The other HOA members were there, a retired couple who looked terrified, a young woman who was clearly just there for the free cookies, and the HOA treasurer, a nervous-looking man named Gerald, who flinched every time Karen spoke. Karen stood before a projector screen, a laser pointer in her hand. She had prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I kid you not. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "We are here today to discuss a grave threat to our community's harmony and property values." The first slide popped up. It was a grainy picture of my tower, taken from her second-story window. The title, in a dramatic blood-red font, read, "The Metal Menace." For the next 20 minutes, she subjected us to a masterclass in fear-mongering. She had slides with diagrams of dangerous radio waves penetrating cartoon houses. She had stock photos of lightning-striking antennas. She had a nonsensical chart that supposedly linked ham radio to a decrease in local bird populations. At one point, she claimed my transmissions could theoretically scramble the signals for people's garage door openers, trapping them inside their homes forever. Gerald, the treasurer, gasped in horror. The retired couple clutched each other's hands. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up, holding a slim folder. "Thank you, Karen," I said, my voice calm and reasonable. "That was Very imaginative. Now, if I may, I'd like to present a few facts. I calmly and methodically dismantled her entire presentation. I explained what radio waves actually are. I showed them my FCC license, a federal document. I explained the rigorous testing and regulations we have to follow. I even brought up something called PRB1, a federal ruling that limits the power of local ordinances to restrict amateur radio operations. I tried to win them over, talking about how ham radio operators are often the first line of communication in natural disasters when cell towers go down. We're a community resource, I concluded. We're here to help. It was a brilliant defense. I was logical, I was charming, I was factual. It didn't matter. Karen had scared them. All in favor of imposing a $200 daily fine until the structure is removed? She asked, her eyes boring into the other members. Every hand except mine went up. Gerald's hand shot up so fast he almost dislocated his shoulder. My heart sank. I had lost. The fines would bankrupt me in a matter of months. I left her house feeling utterly defeated. The joy of my new home had been completely poisoned. As I walked home, the beautiful silhouette of my tower against the evening sky felt less like a monument and more like a tombstone. I slumped down in my radio shack, staring at my silent equipment. I was venting my frustrations on an online ham radio forum, typing out the whole sorry saga. A minute later, a private message popped up. It was from a user named W2FCC. The message was simple. Stop fighting the HOA. You're fighting the wrong battle. Call the FCC's Enforcement Bureau. Tell them everything. And start documenting. A tiny spark of hope flickered to life. The FCC, the actual, federal, no-nonsense FCC. I had been fighting a local bully with local rules. It was time to bring in the feds. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Federal Communications Commission. The call was surprisingly easy. I didn't get a robot or an endless phone tree. I got a man named Mr. Henderson, whose voice was calm, professional, and blessedly free of bureaucratic nonsense. I explained everything, from the first passive-aggressive welcome to the PowerPoint presentation from hell. He listened patiently, only interrupting to ask for specific dates and details. So, she's fining you $200 a day for erecting a tower that the city permitted? For a federally licensed activity? He asked, a note of what sounded like weary amusement in his voice. That's the gist of it, yes, I said. And she's put these threats in writing? Every single one. I have a file. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the gentle tapping of a keyboard. Mr. Henderson? I asked, my anxiety spiking. I'm here, Alex, he said. I'm just reading up on the Whispering Pines HOA covenants, which, thanks to the internet, are publicly available. Fascinating reading. He cleared his throat. Okay, Alex. Here is what I want you to do. Do not pay the fines. Do not engage with this woman any further. Install a security camera with audio recording capability pointed at your front door and your tower. Continue to document everything. And then, you wait. Wait for what? I asked. You wait for her to cross a line? Mr. Henderson said, his voice now holding a steely edge. You wait for her to move from harassment to direct action. When she does, you call me directly. My number is in my email signature, which I'm sending you right now. We take interference with licensed federal communications very, very seriously. I hung up the phone, a slow, wide grin spreading across my face. The game had changed. Karen thought she was the queen, enforcing the rules of her little kingdom. She had no idea she was about to pick a fight with the king. The next week was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every day, a new cream-colored envelope appeared, the fines accumulating at an alarming rate. I saved each one, unopened, in my evidence folder. I followed Mr. Henderson's advice to the letter. I bought and installed a high-definition security camera, a discreet little dome tucked under the eaves of my porch, covering my entire front yard and the base of my tower. I stopped answering my door. I stopped responding to her emails. I gave her nothing but silence. The silence, it turned out, drove her crazier than any argument could have. One afternoon, she cornered me as I was getting the mail. I saw her marching across her lawn towards me, and my heart started to race. This was it. Alex, she barked, I have not received payment for your fines, which now total $1,400. This is your final warning. I just looked at her, my face a perfect mask of neutrality. I didn't say a word. If that tower is not gone by the end of the week, she snarled, her face turning a blotchy red, I will be forced to take legal action. I will put a lien on this house so fast your head will spin. You will not be able to sell it, refinance it, nothing. You will be trapped here with that monstrosity. She was practically screaming now. I just nodded slowly, turned around, and walked back inside, my pulse thrumming with adrenaline. I went straight to my computer and reviewed the footage. The audio was crystal clear. Her threats were beautifully, damningly preserved. I exported the file and emailed it to Mr. Henderson with the subject line, I think she's about to cross the line. He replied within 5 minutes. Noted. We are standing by. Let her make her move. Her move came 2 days later. I was at work, which is to say I was sitting in a Starbucks down the street, sipping a latte and watching a live feed from my security camera on my laptop. At 10:15 a.m., a rusty, beat-to-hell Ford Ranger pulled up to my house. It didn't have any company logos on it. 2 guys who looked like they'd just lost a bar fight got out. They were carrying heavy-duty wrenches and a sawzall. And then she appeared. Karen. She strode onto my lawn like a conquering general, pointing a commanding finger at the base of my tower. She was directing them. She was instructing them to come onto my private property and dismantle my tower. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was everything. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Henderson's direct line. She's doing it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She hired guys. They're on my lawn right now. They're about to start taking it down. Stay where you are, Alex. Mr. W.W., Henderson said, his voice suddenly ice-cold in all business. Do not go back to the house. Do not engage. A federal field unit is 5 minutes away. Just keep watching. I watched, my heart pounding against my ribs. One of the goons was spitting on his hands, getting ready to put a wrench on the first bolt. Karen stood there, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. She had won. She had beaten the loud, obnoxious new guy with his stupid radio hobby. And then, a sleek, black Ford sedan with government plates turned onto my street. It wasn't flashy, but it radiated an aura of absolute, unquestionable authority. It pulled up silently to the curb. Mr. Henderson got out of the passenger side, wearing a sharp suit. The driver's side door opened, and a much larger, more intimidating man got out. He was wearing a navy blue jacket with FCC enforcement embroidered on the chest. They walked onto my lawn. Karen's smug smile faltered. She looked at them, then at the goons, a flicker of confusion on her face. Can I help you, gentlemen? She asked, her voice regaining a bit of its imperious tone. Are you Karen Robinson, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association? Mr. Henderson asked, his voice polite but firm. I am, she said, puffing out her chest. And this is a private matter. This man, she pointed at my house, is in violation of our covenants. Actually, ma'am, Mr. Henderson said, you are in violation of federal law. The color drained from Karen's face. The 2 goons froze, wrenches in hand. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Let me refresh your memory, Mr. Henderson said. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and the air was filled with Karen's own screeching voice, captured by my camera 2 days earlier. I will put a lien on this house so fast your head will spin. Karen went white as a sheet. That's taken out of context. Is it? The big enforcement agent asked, taking a step forward. Because right now, you appear to be directing these gentlemen to tamper with a federally licensed amateur radio station. That falls under Section 333 of the Communications Act of 1934. Willful and malicious interference. It's a federal offense. The 2 goons looked at each other. One of them dropped his wrench. It clanged loudly on the sidewalk. They started backing away towards their truck. Hey, lady, you didn't say nothing about no feds. One of them mumbled before they both scrambled into the cab and peeled out, leaving a trail of blue smoke behind them. Karen was alone, surrounded. Her eyes darted back and forth, looking for an escape that wasn't there. Her entire world, her tiny kingdom of beige walls and iron-fisted rules, was crumbling around her. This is harassment, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I'm going to call my lawyer. I'm going to call my congressman. You do that, Mr. Henderson said calmly. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't cream-colored. It was a sterile, official-looking carbon copy. In the meantime, however, you are being served with this official citation from the Federal Communications Commission. He handed it to her. Her hand trembled as she took it. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the page. I could see the numbers from my laptop screen, even from a distance. The fine wasn't for $100 or $200, it was for $10,000. She let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. This citation is for the repeated harassment and willful interference, Mr. Henderson stated, his voice ringing with authority. The FCC will also be issuing a formal cease and desist order to the Whispering Pines HOA, invalidating any and all of your attempts to restrict this federally protected activity. Any further action taken against Mr. Miller by you or the HOA will result in further fines and potential criminal charges. Do you understand? Karen just stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She couldn't speak. She just nodded, a single, spastic jerk of her head. Have a nice day, ma'am, Mr. Henderson said. He and the agent turned, got back in their black sedan, and drove away as silently as they had arrived. Karen stood alone on my lawn for a full minute, the FCC citation fluttering in her hand. Then, she let out a defeated whimper, turned, and did the saddest walk of shame I have ever had the pleasure of witnessing, back to her beige prison. I closed my laptop, took a long, slow sip of my now cold latte, and allowed myself the biggest, most satisfying smile of my entire life. I came home to a hero's welcome. Not a parade, nothing like that, but something better. As I pulled into my driveway, my neighbors, the terrified retired couple, the woman who was only there for the cookies, were out in their yards. They saw me, and they smiled. The retired guy gave me a thumbs up. The woman gave me a little wave. The spell had been broken. The wicked witch was dead. Word travels fast in a suburb. The story of the FCC takedown became the stuff of local legend. Karen resigned as HOA president in disgrace a week later. All the fines against me were quietly dropped. The HOA sent out a revised newsletter that made a very pointed clarification about federal preemption regarding telecommunications devices. Months have passed. My Radio Shack is my sanctuary. The 50-foot tower in my backyard is no longer a symbol of defiance, but a landmark of victory. My good friends Dave and Gary are over right now, grilling burgers on my patio. The neighborhood is quiet, peaceful, happy. I'm sitting at my workbench, the dials on my Yaesu glowing softly in the twilight. I key the microphone. CQ, this is Kilo 4 Alpha Lima X-ray, calling CQ and listening. A voice crackles back instantly, clear as a bell, from 1,000 miles away. K4ALX, got you 5x9 here in Colorado. You've got a great signal tonight, my friend. I look out the window at my tower, silhouetted against the sunset, and then at my friends laughing in the yard. I press the transmit button one more time. Thanks for that, I say into the microphone, a grin spreading across my face. Yeah, you could say the reception around here has improved dramatically. And the best part? The neighborhood has never been quieter.